It was billed as a routine panel discussion, nothing more than a polite exchange of policy views on national television. But anyone who'd watched Jasmine Crockett before knew better. She didn't do routine. Especially not when sitting across from someone like Kash Patel. The show was Capital Exchange, a live political roundtable where things could go off-script fast. Tonight's episode was meant to cover national security and civil liberties, with audience questions sprinkled in. The stage lights flared. The cameras rolled. Congresswoman Crockett, the moderator, said, "You've been vocal on surveillance abuses. Mr. Patel helped draft many of those policies. Would you care to respond to his claims that such programs have protected the homeland without targeting Americans unfairly?" Jasmine leaned forward slowly, her hands folded neatly on the table. "Sure," she said, her voice smooth, steady. "But let me first say, I'm glad Mr. Patel's here. It's always helpful to hear directly from the architect of the playbook, before we all realize the game was rigged." The crowd gave a soft ripple of laughter. Kash Patel smiled, clearly ready for this. "Rigged," he said. "Congresswoman, your accusation sounds more like a headline than a fact." Jasmine didn't blink. Maybe because the truth should make headlines. The energy shifted. The moderator glanced at his notes nervously. Something was brewing. Kash Patel leaned back in his chair, flashing the crowd a measured smirk. "Congresswoman, I've worked under 2 presidents and advised on counterterrorism at the highest levels. The idea that our intelligence programs are some kind of conspiracy against citizens," Jasmine cut in, calm but razor-sharp. "No one said conspiracy. I said abuse. There's a difference, and I think your resume proves it." The audience tensed. A few people murmured. 1 or 2 let out a low "goo." Kash's smile tightened. "Abuse? You mean the same intelligence that stopped a dozen plots before they made it to headlines?" "I mean the same intelligence that somehow missed January 6th while keeping tabs on black church groups and immigration lawyers," Jasmine replied, her tone never rising, her eyes locked on his. There was a long pause. Even the moderator looked momentarily stunned. Kash shifted forward. "So you're suggesting the system you serve in is broken?" "No," Jasmine said, her voice low but magnetic. "I'm saying the system you helped design wasn't built to protect everyone equally." Gasps echoed in the studio. A few audience members started clapping slowly, unsure whether to celebrate or hold their breath. This wasn't going to be just another political exchange. This was personal, and live. Kash Patel's jaw tightened. The applause still echoed faintly as he leaned into the mic with practiced calm. "You know what's dangerous, Congresswoman," he said. "When elected officials use sound bites instead of substance. You talk about equity and fairness, but while you criticize national security, you sit in briefings where you know exactly why we do what we do." Jasmine's smile didn't budge. She let him continue. "You want to make me the villain," he went on, "because it's easier than admitting that you've had access to the same information. You've seen the threats. You know the stakes. But you'd rather play to the crowd." The moderator glanced nervously between them. The atmosphere was razor-thin. "I play to the Constitution," Jasmine finally said, still composed. "And if that crowd claps for it, maybe it's because they're still waiting for someone on that side of the table to respect it." A few people in the audience stood up. A short burst of applause broke out, this time louder, more confident. Kash opened his mouth to respond again, but Jasmine wasn't finished. "And let me say this clearly," she added, leaning forward now. "You don't get to lecture me on national security while you defend people who walked into the Capitol waving zip ties and shouting about revolution." That line hit like thunder. The audience went quiet again, but it wasn't discomfort. It was anticipation. Kash Patel's face hardened. The smile was gone now, replaced by a tight, calculating stare. He adjusted his mic. "You're turning a policy discussion into a courtroom drama," he said. "This isn't about feelings, it's about facts. And the fact is, your party has politicized intelligence so badly that we can't tell enemies from voters anymore. The words hung in the air like smoke. The moderator flinched. The audience recoiled. Someone gasped audibly. Jasmine didn't move. She blinked once, slowly, then spoke with the clarity of someone who had been waiting for that exact moment. "I'm going to give you a chance to take that back," she said. "Because what you just said didn't miss the mark, it ripped it off the wall." Kash folded his arms. "Did I stutter?" Jasmine's expression turned to stone. "No," she said coldly. "But your mask did slip." The silence was electric. Then Jasmine sat up straighter, looked directly into the camera, and delivered the line that stopped the room: "You don't want security, you want control. And the second someone like me demands answers, you call it emotion. But let's be clear, my intelligence doesn't threaten this country, yours does." A moment of stunned stillness. Then, an eruption of applause. The moderator tried to regain control, but the crowd had already chosen its moment. The clapping thundered through the studio. Even the moderator looked shaken, fumbling with his cue cards. Jasmine Crockett sat poised, cool, her message still ringing in the air like a courtroom gavel. Kash Patel leaned toward his mic, but for the first time, he hesitated. The sharp confidence in his voice had dulled, just slightly. "So that's it," he said. "You reduced decades of national defense work into a personal attack. You think calling me the problem makes people safer?" Jasmine tilted her head, never breaking eye contact. "I think pretending there isn't a problem is how people get hurt." Kash chuckled, but it was dry, forced. "You know what's funny, Congresswoman? You sit here with your talking points and applause lines, but when something goes wrong in this country, you'll be the first to demand accountability from the very agencies you're dismantling." "No," Jasmine shot back, her tone firm. "I'll be the first to demand accountability from the people who designed them and then walked away when things went wrong." The audience murmured again. Kash shifted in his chair. "And for the record," she added, "if my talking points sound like truth, maybe it's because you've gotten used to silence." That line hit differently, sharper, quieter. The moderator looked at Patel, waiting. But he had no comeback. Just a clenched jaw. Just the weight of a camera that didn't blink. Sensing the tension boiling over, the moderator forced a nervous chuckle and attempted to reset the stage. "Well, let's pivot just slightly, perhaps to foreign policy and defense strategy," but Jasmine raised one hand, politely but firmly. "Before we move on," she said, her voice calm but commanding, "I need to correct the record." Kash shifted uncomfortably, eyes narrowing. "I'm not here to perform," she continued. "I'm here because people who look like me, and think like me, don't usually get seats at this table. And when we do, we're told to stay polite while history gets rewritten right in front of us." The crowd was absolutely still. No one dared move. "And if that makes you uncomfortable," she added, glancing at Patel, "maybe it's not me you're afraid of. Maybe it's accountability." Kash tried to interject, but Jasmine pressed on. "You say I politicize intelligence. But you built a system that protected secrets more than people. That punished whistleblowers but rewarded silence. And when it failed, you blamed the watchers, not the architects." The moderator opened his mouth but said nothing. Patel sat motionless. Jasmine leaned back, finally done. The audience, once again, erupted into applause, longer, louder this time. And just like that, the pivot failed. There was no moving on. As the applause slowly faded, the moderator glanced off stage, clearly rattled. He reached for his earpiece, likely hoping for direction from the control room. But the silence didn't last. A voice rang out from the back of the studio, clear, unfiltered. "Why hasn't anyone challenged Patel like this before?" Heads turned. A middle-aged woman stood up, microphone in hand. She hadn't been selected to speak, but no one stopped her now. I've watched these panels for years, she said. And I've never seen anyone call it out like this, not once. What Congresswoman Crockett just said. That's not politics. That's lived reality. The room buzzed. A few people clapped again. Patel shifted uncomfortably in his chair, looking toward the producers. The moderator stammered, we do appreciate audience participation, but we're on a tight schedule, so. Another audience member stood up, this time a young veteran in uniform. She's right, he said, voice firm. We were trained to defend freedom, not to protect people in suits who call it national security while spying on Americans. The crowd murmured louder now. It wasn't just a political debate anymore. It had become something more raw, more real. Kash Patel tried to regain control. This is a setup, he said, eyes darting. This is a coordinated ambush. Jasmine didn't move. She didn't need to. She just said quietly, if the truth feels like an ambush, maybe it's time to ask who you've been protecting. The crowd gasped, again. There was no coming back from this. Kash Patel's composure finally cracked. He slammed his hand on the table, not hard enough to be threatening, but enough to jolt the moderator and send a ripple of gasps through the studio. This is absurd, he snapped. You bring me on for a policy debate and let it turn into a courtroom circus? I won't sit here and be villainized by someone playing to a crowd. Jasmine didn't flinch. You're not being villainized, she replied evenly. You're being held accountable. There's a difference. The moderator jumped in, flustered. Let's try to maintain order. Mr. Patel, please, but Kash wasn't finished. I've spent my entire career protecting this country while people like her politicized tragedies and turned grief into headlines. That crossed a line. Gasps erupted. Even the control room cut to a wider angle as tension flooded the set. Jasmine turned her head slowly, her tone suddenly ice. People like me? She asked, voice barely above a whisper, but it carried. You mean women? Black women? Elected officials who don't smile while you rewrite history? Patel opened his mouth but couldn't find words. You say I politicize tragedy, she continued. You built your career off of it. And the difference is, I'm not asking for applause. I'm asking for answers. The room was silent. No one dared interrupt her now. Not even the moderator. And Kash? He was no longer in control of the narrative, if he ever had been. The room was still, heavy with silence. Kash Patel stared ahead, jaw clenched, as if trying to will himself back into control. But he couldn't. The moment had shifted entirely. Jasmine Crockett owned the room now. She adjusted the microphone slowly, deliberately. I didn't come here to be liked, she said. I came here to tell the truth. And if that shakes people, maybe it's because they've been too comfortable with lies. She turned slightly, addressing both the crowd and the camera. For years, folks like Mr. Patel sat behind closed doors drafting policies that watched us, tracked us, flagged us, but never protected us. You claim to defend America. Fine. But don't get mad when America starts asking who you've been defending it from. A few audience members stood again. Applause broke out. Not frenzied, this time, it was slow and steady, like something bigger was building beneath it. Kash looked down, then up, searching for a way back in. But there was none. And Jasmine wasn't done. You wanted a soundbite, she said, her voice rising just slightly. Here it is, you don't fear foreign threats. You fear accountability. And I'm not here to shake your hand. I'm here to pull back the curtain. The studio erupted. Standing ovation. Chants even started in the back, say it, Jasmine. Say it. The moderator leaned forward, almost whispering now, we, need to take a break. Too late. The country was already watching. And the script was no longer in Patel's hands. The network cut to commercial, but the tension didn't fade. Backstage, producers scrambled, earpieces crackling with frantic voices. Executives were shouting across split screens, some demanding damage control, others begging them to ride the wave. Social media was already on fire. Clips of Jasmine's "pull back the curtain" line had hit millions of views within minutes. Kash Patel stormed off set, muttering curses under his breath, brushing off aides who tried to calm him. "She ambushed me," he growled to a staffer. That wasn't a debate, it was a takedown. In contrast, Jasmine Crockett stood just off camera, quiet, unshaken. She was approached by two interns, one with tears in her eyes. "Congresswoman, that was the first time I've ever seen someone say it, out loud." "Thank you." Jasmine just nodded, calmly sipping water. She'd been in enough fights to know when the real work started, after the cameras stopped. Down the hall, a senior producer cornered the moderator. "Do you realize what just happened?" she whispered. "We thought this was filler content for Thursday night. Instead, we just aired a political earthquake." The moderator, still pale, could only nod. Back inside the studio, the crowd lingered, no one wanted to leave. Some were chanting. Others stood in stunned silence, as if they'd witnessed history. Because in a way, they had. Jasmine hadn't just won a debate. She had flipped the script, and changed the stakes. By the time the sun rose the next morning, the moment had become a movement. Every major network led with the story. CNN called it "the line heard round the hill." MSNBC ran a highlight reel titled "Crockett dismantles Patel, live and unfiltered." Even Fox News, though defensive, couldn't avoid it. "Crockett hijacks panel, sparks outrage and applause." Clips of Jasmine's line, "I'm not here to shake your hand. I'm here to pull back the curtain," flooded TikTok, X, and Instagram. Millions shared it. Hashtags exploded, #curtain call, #Crockett unfiltered, #Jasmine flips the script. Late night hosts chimed in too. One joked, "Jasmine Crockett didn't just flip the script, she rewrote the whole damn season." And while Kash Patel's team scrambled to spin the story, it was too late. Every interview request, every op-ed defending his side, was drowned out by the noise of a public reckoning. Meanwhile, activists, veterans, journalists, and even some former Intel officials began chiming in online, some praising Jasmine for saying what they'd been too afraid to. One anonymous post from a former NSA contractor simply read, "She wasn't wrong. The system protects itself." Until someone brave enough names it out loud. That post was shared over 600,000 times in 12 hours. Back in D.C., congressional offices were abuzz. Even lawmakers who normally avoided public spats couldn't help but take notice. Jasmine Crockett hadn't just spoken up. She had reframed the conversation. And Patel? For now, he was a headline, just not the kind he'd planned. 3 days later, Jasmine Crockett stood alone in her office just before sunrise. The Capitol dome was still cloaked in blue morning haze, the city unusually quiet after the storm she had stirred. Her phone was buried under unread messages. Requests. Praise. Threats. Invitations. Opportunities. But Jasmine wasn't looking at her phone. She was staring out the window, arms folded, mind still sharp. She hadn't planned the moment. She hadn't rehearsed a takedown. She had spoken because silence was no longer an option. And the world responded. A knock came at the door. Her chief of staff peeked in. "You ready?" Jasmine turned. "For what?" The aide gave a small smile. "Well, the hearing you were supposed to chair." "But also," she paused, then added, "whatever this becomes next." Jasmine picked up her notes. "It becomes something if we build on it," she said. "Otherwise, it's just noise." Downstairs, reporters were already gathering. Her name was trending globally. People who had never watched a single policy hearing in their lives were now quoting her. In a hallway packed with cameras, someone asked her, "Congresswoman Crockett, what do you say to those calling this your breakout moment?" She stopped. Thought. Then said, clearly, "Moments pass. But truth? That stays. I didn't break out. I broke through." The microphones buzzed. Flashbulbs popped. And as Jasmine Crockett walked calmly into the hearing room, one thing was clear: she hadn't just flipped the script on Kash Patel. She had written a new chapter in political accountability, and the nation was still reading.